Well, good morning and welcome to your next Menopause Morning. Today, we're going to talk about something that I know is very important to you, and that is weight gain during menopause. And, there's a lot of symptoms tied into menopause that you could be dealing with yourself. And that would include anything from weight gain to sleeplessness to brain fog to fatigue to hot flashes to risk factors for osteoporosis, cardiovascular system challenges, and the list goes on. But I tell you, the one that I see that women, it just agonizes them so much is that you go from childbearing years into perimenopause, and somewhere during that time, all of a sudden you put on like 20, 30 pounds. And the frustration I hear all the time from women coming into my office, and I've been listening to this since, oh heck, I've been in private practice since January of 2001, and it was about 4 years after that that I started working with women with hormones and menopause. So heck, now about 21 and a half years now, and I've been hearing it all the time. It's just a frustration of I haven't changed anything with my diet. I still keep up my same fitness routine, but I've gained 20 to 30 pounds. And they're just like, how do I get rid of this? And that could be you as well. It's something that is multifaceted, and it's not typically, if you've already eaten pretty well and you had a fitness routine prior to menopause, it's probably not that your diet needs to change or you have to up your fitness, because there's other really hormonal and metabolic and functional things going on in your body that's driving this. Now, number one, what I want you to understand is that your body will do everything it can to maintain proper estrogen balance. Right now, when you are making a transition from childbearing years into perimenopause and menopause, and then finally postmenopausal, what's happening, your ovaries are not producing the same amount of estrogen they've been used to, and they're not producing the progesterone. So what happens at that time of your life, you're going to produce less estrogen and significantly less estradiol, because estradiol is more important during childbearing years and to be able to actually have a baby and go full term with a child. What's happening then is the responsibility of the production of your estrogen turns toward your adrenals as the primary producer of your estrogen. Now, what's different with your adrenals will actually produce estrone, and then the estrone goes to your liver, and then your liver can convert the estrone into any needed estradiol or estriol that you need for your perfect and proper hormone balance. Now, if you enter into perimenopause and your adrenal glands are working really well, it just takes care of it. And there really aren't even any symptoms that you have been told are symptoms of menopause. Because I want you to, and you've probably heard me say this before if you've watched my Menopause Morning videos, is that the only two true symptoms of menopause is you stop having a monthly cycle and you can't conceive anymore. So all the other symptoms that you could be having, one of which is including the weight gain, is going into this transition period, again, from childbearing years into perimenopause to menopause and postmenopausal. But you go into that time of your life with adrenal glands that just aren't working very well. Now, the problem with that is, remember, that's going to be the primary place during this transition that you're going to produce estrogen. And that's where you will be producing estrogen for the rest of your life. Now, what's important, though, is a secondary avenue for producing estrogen is in your fat cells. All right, so adipose tissue, which is fat tissue, can actually produce estrogens. Now, the problem with this is, number one, it's not very efficient. Your adrenals are much more efficient at producing estrogen than your fat cells are. And number two, if your body determines that you need more fat to produce more estrogen, guess what's going to happen? If you've guessed, I'm going to put on 20, 30 more pounds relatively quickly, and it's going to seem impossible to lose that weight. You're absolutely 100% correct. And and the whole issue with this is, and it is very difficult to lose for if you're a woman in that position, because your body is adding the fat as a health balance to help you really engage your estrogen production in the way that it really needs to be. So there's this kind of push pull going on between what you want for your body and what you don't want for your body, and really what your body's looking for an estrogen perspective. So, so number one problem with weight gain is going to be tied into that. Now, what I also want you to understand is that, and this is a key for you, and potentially another big piece of the puzzle for you. It's not just about that your adrenals can't produce the estrogen and now you have to accumulate more fat in your body to maintain estrogen balance. The bigger thing really is that, why are your adrenals not doing their job? Right. And I've if you're following the Menopause Morning podcast, it goes back to earlier this year when I was talking deeper about each different trigger for what's causing the adrenal problem. So here's where it gets interesting, because the number one reason for the accelerated weight gain is because you're just not producing estrogen in your adrenals. So now your body depends on fat. So will help accumulate more fat cells in your body to try its best to maintain any semblance of balance with estrogens. Now, recognizing that the number one issue with that is because your adrenals aren't functioning. Well, and then you have to think of, well, why are my adrenals not functioning, right? Because your adrenals and basically your entire hormonal system is a reactive system. It's reacting to what's going on in your body and what's going on in your life. Now the most common triggers for your adrenals, interestingly enough, also lead to weight gain. So the most common triggers, number one would be, I don't want to even say number one, because all of these are equally as damaging to your adrenals. But I would say that your high levels of mental emotional stress are definitely a trigger. A lot, and it seems obvious that your mental and emotional stress will trigger your adrenals and your production of cortisol. That makes sense. Except what a lot of people don't know is that, and perhaps you don't as well, is that your stress is also an inflammatory trigger. And when you get inflamed, that triggers your adrenals, because now, due to the inflammation, you need to produce more cortisone, which is your body's natural anti-inflammatory. So the stress creates the cortisol response and leads to inflammation, which creates a cortisone response. And understand, when you're dealing with inflammation in your body, that's also a part of weight gain. All right, so that's one significant trigger. After that, you have to think of anything else that's creating inflammation in your body. Now, I've been working with this for a long time. So it's been, again, 24 and a half years that I'm working with women just like you, dealing with symptoms of menopause and overcoming those naturally. And I can recognize that there are some key triggers that are going on for most women. So the mental emotional stress is one of them. Another one that's a bigger one that's really, it is a big issue for a lot of women. And it's a newer issue in today's society, and it's tied into spike proteins. And spike proteins can be very damaging to your adrenal glands. They can be very damaging to really basically any area in the body. That they can create cellular destruction anywhere in your body, which then, if it's specifically with your adrenals, obviously that's going to have an effect. But anywhere where there's damage that's going to be caused, it's going to be driving inflammation. And spike proteins can be an issue for you if you've had a relatively bad case of COVID, or if you've had an mRNA vaccine. Spike proteins are more likely to be an issue for you. And I get it. I've been dealing with that myself for, I would say, the last couple of years, and thankfully with success, I'm improving that now. And that could be something that could be driving a lot of this for you as well. Now, on top of that, you have to think of anything else that drives inflammation in your body. Yeah, so we talked about the stress, we talked about the spike proteins, but you could have infections in your gut, which is unfortunately quite common. You could have different types of detrimental bacteria. You could have yeast infections. You could have H. pylori. You could have different types of parasites in your body. There's a whole host of things that can go on in your gut that you're usually unaware of. And the problem with that is, when you have these problems going in your gut, number one, it does affect your digestive function, so you don't absorb and assimilate your nutrients as well. Number two, it's going to drive inflammation. Remember, I said inflammation is going to have a significant impact on your hormonal system because of the need to create the cortisone to take care of that. But then on top of that, when you have a problem in your gut, you have a problem in your gut, your brain, and your immune system collectively, because that's a shared synergy between the three of them. And again, anything driving inflammation is affecting your hormonal system. All right, now another common trigger that I see all the time is food sensitivity. And a lot of people don't know this, and perhaps you don't as well, but when you have a food sensitivity, to recognize 86% of the people who have a food sensitivity are asymptomatic. So it's not like you eat the food and you feel like, like crap afterwards, right? It's it's just that you eat the food, you're asymptomatic, so therefore you don't have a recognition that this food is affecting you, but it's still driving initially a low level of inflammatory response in the gut. And as that continues, because there's inflammatory receptors throughout your whole body, eventually you end up in this like chronic systemic inflammatory state, which is going to be another trigger, for the weight gain. And on top of that, another common trigger is individuals who are dealing with a high level of toxicity. And just to be very frank, we're all dealing with some level of toxicity. It's the world and the environment and the atmosphere that we live in. We can't avoid toxicity, but some people aren't doing as good of a job of getting rid of toxins in their body. And generally, it's because of a high amount of women that I see in my office. And I would say this is a high amount of people in general. It's not just women, but I work with women all the time. So that's my reference point. But I see when I'm doing testing for hormones, I'm also looking at the liver from two different levels, a phase one and a phase two liver detoxification pathway. And what I can share is that probably about 2/3 to maybe 3/4 of the women I'm working with, they have either moderate to significant or dangerous levels of liver congestion that you're dealing with, which now puts a burden on the rest of your systems of detoxification and just makes you kind of a walking toxic mess. And that's going to drive, again, an inflammatory response. Or another outside aspect. And I like to think that, the people who are attracted to what I'm talking about here, you have some semblance of understanding that nutrition is important for you. And you might already have a relatively high level of nutritional integrity. But, for those that aren't, if you're living on pizza and flour products and soda and caffeine and alcohol, obviously that's going to be a big trigger, right? Because all of those foods are a high level potential inflammatory. And lastly, one area that a lot of people wouldn't think about that could be affecting your hormones is if you are the extreme fitness buff. If you push it so hard to a level of exhaustion. I see this all the time too with women who before, while they're in childbearing years, they're kind of lean, slim, feeling, and kind of buff and feeling good about where they're at because you really do take care of your nutrition. You really do take care of your fitness. Excuse me. And then you enter these menopause years and lo and behold, you've got all these issues with the weight gain. And then what a lot of people do is they just really significantly increase their fitness routine to the point of overdoing it. Yeah, because overdoing it, and especially if you're doing way too much cardiovascular activity, while I can acknowledge that you do want a healthy heart and you do want to have some cardiovascular activity, when your hormonal system is already off and then you push the high cardio work to an extreme, that can actually make your hormonal system even worse. Yeah, so so I want you to recognize with this is number one is the weight gain is there not because you're doing something wrong typically. It's because of things you don't know. It's the weight gain is there because you don't know how bad your adrenals are. The weight gain is there because you don't know if you have spike proteins or not. The weight gain is there because you don't know if you have infections in your gut or foods you're sensitive to or a body filled with toxins. You really, I want you to know that it's usually things that you're not aware about. And that's what women do with me in my office all the time. I'm just here to really create awareness. I'm always after an initial session where I also use some body signs to understand what the triggers really are. That helps me direct testing to be very specific and personalized to you to know what's going on in your body. And now some no-brainers. Obviously, I'm always doing a hormone test, and not because I'm wondering, because if you have weight gain after entering into perimenopause, I already know that your adrenals are off. But I'm not testing because I'm wondering if your adrenals are off. I'm testing to see what's really going on. Because I'm not just looking at like two or three different hormones. I'm looking at like 32 different hormones and how these other functional areas of your body really affect you. And then on top of that, if your body signs say there's something going on in your gut, well, of course, I'm going to be recommending a test to see what those infections are in your gut. And I'm going to recommend a proper food sensitivity test so we can uncover what foods you could be eating that are basically inflaming you, that are leading to the adrenal issues, that are leading to a part of this weight gain. And then sometimes when I do this, I find people have sensitivities to foods that they just weren't ever aware of. I'm thinking of one person off the top of my head who ate eggs at least 5 days a week, and she says usually every day, and she had a high sensitivity to eggs. So the eggs themselves were driving an inflammatory state. The inflammatory state was affecting the hormones, and it was a big piece of the puzzle for this particular person in really getting back to a state of normalcy from a hormone perspective. So I really want you to understand, again, as kind of wrapping it up, is that if you're gaining weight during menopause, it's usually because of something you don't know. Yeah, so it's not really, if you've already been working out and you have your fitness routine, it's not about pushing that harder. It's really not about that you have to do a lot of that, as you already know, the natural recommendation or the overall mainstream recommendation. This comes from not only conventional doctors but also most holistic practitioners. They just want to give you estradiol. I'm going to give you estradiol and progesterone and just call it a day. But the problem with that is that doesn't fix the adrenal problem. It doesn't fix the inflammation being driven by what's going on in regard to infections or food sensitivity. It doesn't stop the problems with toxicity. It doesn't take care of the spike proteins. It just gives you a false sense of improvement by giving you just hormones that your body can't make anymore because it's not functional. So you really want to get back into that. You want to get back into addressing the underlying triggers for your hormonal system and get your hormonal system back in balance so you can live like the 15% of women who enter menopause with the only symptoms they have is no longer having a monthly cycle and no longer being able to conceive. And that's the goal for you and for really every woman that I work with, is to get you back to that point, to live into that, to basically feel young, turn back the clock and just feel young again, which I think is what every woman wants. And I know, because you're watching this video, I know you want to lose weight, and that can happen with a lot more ease than you may think, but you have to take care of the functional issues. All right, so with that said, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below and I will address them personally. And I will also, once this all gets out on the different social media sites, I will also put a link to join the Menopause Morning group. That way you'll get regular notifications of what my subject is going to be for the week. My videos are typically every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific time. And most of them are live unless I happen to be traveling. Then I'll have a recorded video on there, but they are mostly live. That way it gives you an opportunity, if you would like, to ask questions or make comments in a live setting. And with that said, I look forward to continually educating you on everything that I've learned over the last 24 and a half years about menopause and hormones, and to ultimately help you take care of the things you want to take care of, which this week is our focus is on weight loss. All right, have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Take care.